The assembly will now come to order. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson, Assemblywoman Backus, Assemblywoman Gilbert Axelrod, Assemblywoman Brown May, Assemblyman Carter, Assemblywoman Cohen, Assemblywoman Considine, Assemblyman DeLong, Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblyman De Silva, Assemblywoman Duran, Assemblywoman Gallant, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Assemblywoman Gorlow, Assemblyman Gray, Assemblyman Gurr, Assemblyman Hafen, Assemblywoman Hanson, Assemblywoman Hardy, Assemblyman Hibbets, Assemblywoman Haudegi, Assemblywoman Kasama, Assemblyman Koenig, Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch, Assemblywoman Marzola, Assemblyman MacArthur, Assemblywoman Brittany Miller, Assemblyman C.H. Miller, Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, Assemblywoman Mosca, Assemblywoman Newby, Assemblyman Wynn, Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblyman Orent-Licker, Assemblywoman Peters, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, Assemblywoman Taylor, Assemblywoman Thomas, Assemblywoman Torres, Assemblyman Watts, Assemblyman Yeager, Assemblyman Urick, Speaker Yeager.
Here. Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May the record reflect all members are present.
The record so shall reflect. We have all 42 members present. That means we do have a quorum. Would members of the assembly and guests please rise? This afternoon we have the prayer by Pastor Ken Haskins from right here in Carson City from First Christian Church.
Our eternal Father, we learn from the past and we plan for the future, but we live in this moment, this day that you have made. So enable us to make most of every opportunity and to make the best of our time. As opportunity presents itself, help us to do good to all people, to everyone. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Order business 2, reading and approval of the journal.
Carson City, Wednesday, May 24, 2023. Assembly called to order.
Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to end with the reading of the journal and allow the Speaker and Chief Clerk to make any necessary corrections and additions.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Members, we are going to go to order of business 15, remarks from the floor. As is usual, this time of the session, we have quite a bit of business in front of us, so we'll give members a chance to introduce their guests, and then after that, we'll take a brief recess so guests can leave the floor. If you'd like to stay with us, you're welcome to as well. And we will start under order of business 15, first with Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with me, I have Tony Ramirez from Make the Road and Mark Rauda from... He actually didn't want me to introduce him today, but I couldn't introduce one without the other. And these are just great young Latino men who are doing amazing work in our community, working on bills that directly impact our community and making sure that our community voices are centered. And I'm just really excited to see all the work that they've been working on along with ourselves as we wrap up these last few days of session. So if everyone can give them a round welcome, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have some great folks that are visiting from Las Vegas, and please help me welcome them. First, I have David. Would you please stand up? David Harbour. He's a Clark County School District elementary school teacher. He was a middle school special education teacher and is currently teaching gifted and talented. His wife, Deborah Harbour, she also works for the Clark County School District. Deborah has been a nurse for 42 years, with the bulk of her career working with pediatric oncology and hematology before becoming a middle school nurse 15 years ago. Deb and Dave moved to Las Vegas in the 1980s. Some great friends of mine, our daughters went to the Rainbow Youth Theater together. They went to Las Vegas Academy together. They went to university together, and they were also roommates. So it's fantastic to have them here. And then also, if I could have the two of you step up, their friends. We have a University of Texas graduate, Shell Mercer, a family law attorney from 1988 through 2020 when she was elected to the Family Division of the 8th Judicial District Court. She is currently a family court judge for Department Z. And her husband, Robert Mercer, a 1982 graduate of El Dorado High School. In 1991, he became a Metro police officer, and he retired in 2020. Robert still works for the department as a part-time driving instructor out at the Las Vegas Speedway. So thank you all, please. Thank you so much for coming. They are very excited to be here, and please help me welcome them.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For generations, AA-NHPI healthcare professionals have been on America's front lines. This is seen most prevalently within the makeup of our nation's doctors and nurses. In Nevada, Filipino Americans make up roughly 4% of the total state population, but account for upwards to 15% of all our state's hardworking nurses. Every sixth nurse in our state is of Filipino descent. I also want to highlight the important contributions of South Asian doctors to our community. South Asian Americans make up roughly 1% of Nevada's population, but account for nearly 1 out of 7 doctors in our state. Nowhere is this sense of service and sacrifice of these healthcare professionals more vividly displayed than during our nation's fight with COVID. According to the National Nurses United, the country's largest nurses union, 26.4% of the nurses who died from COVID-19 and related complications in the United States were of AA-NHPI descent. These numbers bring to light a community whose role in the larger national story is often untold, but today, in celebration of AA-NHPI Heritage Month, I want to commemorate them and bring to light their sense of duty and dedication to our communities, to Nevada, and to our nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, today is another somber anniversary involving children. Today is the 40th annual National Missing Children's Day. So please visit the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children's website, which is missingkids.org, or the FBI's website, which is fbi.gov, for ways you can help bring these children home. Sometimes just sharing their information on social media is a great way to get their information out, and we've seen over the last few years that we are able to help bring our children home just by sharing that information on social media. So thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Are there any other remarks under Order of Business 15? Assemblywoman Howdigi.
1 minute recess, Mr. Speaker.
We will take a 1-minute recess to allow our guests to exit the floor if they'd like. The Assembly will come back to order. We will go to Order of Business 4, Reports of Standing Committees.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which were referred Senate Bills 57-310, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. And your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which was referred Senate Bill 106, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. And your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which were referred Senate Bills 283, 330, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. Elaine Marzullo, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which was referred Senate Bill 370, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. Elaine Marzullo, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Education, to which was referred Senate Bill 80, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. Shannon Bilbright Axelrod, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Government Affairs, to which were referred Senate Bills 155, 434, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. Solana Torres, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 335, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. Brittany Miller, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, to which was referred Senate Bill 60, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. And your Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, to which was referred Senate Bill 328, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation men do pass as amended. And your Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, to which was re-referred Senate Bill 418, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation amended and do pass as amended. Michelle Furlow, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were re-referred Assembly Bill 62, 448, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation do pass. And your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were referred Senate Bills 501, 503, 504, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back to the recommendation do pass. Danielle Monroe Moreno, Chair.
Order of Business 7, Messages from the Senate.
Senate Chamber, Carson City, May 24, 2023. To the Honorable the Assembly, I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed Assembly Bills 13, 20, 53, 144, 316, 343, 394, 414, 424, 455, 456, 464, Assembly Joint Resolution 8. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 23, Amendment 540, Assembly Bill 35, Amendment 548, Assembly Bill 60, Amendment 576, Assembly Bill 127, Amendment 556, Assembly Bill 132, Amendment 610, Assembly Bill 163, Amendment 538, Assembly Bill 169, Amendment 611, Assembly Bill 207, Amendment 586, Assembly Bill 241, Amendment 587, Assembly Bill 256, Amendment 559, Assembly Bill 267, Amendment 613, Assembly Bill 410, Amendment 555, Assembly Bill 514, Amendment 554, and respectfully request your Honorable Body to concur in said amendments. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 202, Amendment numbers 615, 718, and respectfully request your Honorable Body to concur in said amendments. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed as amended Senate Bill 367, and I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day adopted as amended Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 5. Sherry Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of the Senate.
Order of Business 8, Motions, Resolutions, and Notices.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 5, introduced by Senator Lang, urging the expansion of comprehensive cardiovascular screening programs and directing the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Health and Human Services to conduct a study concerning such programs and certain other matters relating to cardiovascular disease.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 5 be referred to your Committee on Health and Human Services.
Without objection, so referred. Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that persons as set forth on the Nevada State Legislature's press accreditation list of May 25th, 2023 be accepted as accredited press representatives, that they be assigned space at the press table in the Assembly Chamber, that they be allowed the use of appropriate broadcasting facilities, and that the list be included in this day's journal.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Order Business 9, Introduction, First Reading, and Reference of Bills.
Senate Bill 367, introduced by Senators Canizaro et al. An act relating to public safety, prescribing the unit of prosecution of certain crimes involving the ownership or possession of a firearm by certain prohibited persons, authorizing the juvenile justice agency and the juvenile court to release certain information and records for the purpose of conducting a background check relating to the sale or transfer of a firearm, requiring a court to transmit to the central repository for Nevada records of criminal history certain records relating to the court-ordered admission to certain mental health facilities of certain children with an emotional disturbance for certain purposes relating to the purchase or possession of a firearm, and providing a demand properly thereto.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 367 be referred to your Committee on Judiciary.
Without objection, so referred. That will take us to Order of Business 11, Second Reading and Amendment.
Senate Bill 57, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, an act relating to insurance revising requirements relating to the submission of certain information to the Commissioner of Insurance by certain persons regulated by the Commissioner, revising provisions concerning the confidentiality of certain records and information, revising requirements for the delivery of certain notices and other documents by electronic means, revising requirements for the conduct of certain hearings before the Commissioner, revising provisions relating to the imposition of certain fees, revising requirements for the issuance and renewal of certain licenses and certificates, revising provisions relating to administrators, prohibiting certain insurers from taking certain actions concerning prescription drugs, revising provisions relating to annuities, imposing certain requirements on persons involved in the sale of prepaid contracts for funeral or burial services, revising certain requirements relating to captive insurers, revising procedures for delinquency proceedings against an insurer, revising provisions relating to bail agents, bail enforcement agents, bail solicitors, and general agents, making various other changes relating to insurance, and providing other matters properly laid thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 47, end of Section 47, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 719, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 719 to Senate Bill 57.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 719 to Senate Bill 57. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 60, introduced by the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, an act relating to elections, revising provisions relating to mail ballots, revising provisions relating to a recount and contest of a presidential election, setting forth a specific form of a declaration of candidacy for an independent candidate for partisan office, revising the methods for paying certain filing fees, revising provisions governing members of election boards, revising provisions relating to when certain candidates may be declared elected at a primary election, revising provisions relating to the form of certain ballots, revising the deadline for a hearing of an election contest, revising provisions relating to risk-limiting audits, revising provisions relating to an application to pre-register or register to vote, revising prohibitions relating to tampering or interfering with certain election equipment or computer programs, requiring the Secretary of State to adopt by regulation a cyber incident response plan for elections, revising the deadline by which a withdrawal of candidacy must be presented by certain candidates, revising the definition of uniformed service voter, revising provisions relating to the limit on contributions to a candidate for office, delaying the effective date of certain provisions relating to automatic voter registration, repealing certain provisions relating to elections, making various other changes relating to elections, providing penalty, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 20, end of Section 20, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There I have Amendment 721 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 721 to Senate Bill 60.
Assemblywoman Gorlow has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 721 to Senate Bill 60. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 80, introduced by the Committee on Education and Act relating to Public Safety, revising the contents of certain policies adopted by the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association and organizations for youth sports concerning the prevention and treatment of injuries to the head, requiring certain schools to adopt such a policy, requiring certain schools to create and distribute a brochure concerning the prevention and treatment of injuries to the head, and establish a concussion management team, providing penalty and providing other measures properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 12, end of Section 12, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 604 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment number 604 to Senate Bill 80.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 604 to Senate Bill 80. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 106, introduced by Senators Severs, Gansert, and Harris, an act relating to ophthalmic dispensing, exempting the sale of prescription eyewear to intended wearers outside the state, and provisions regulating ophthalmic dispensing and providing other matters properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 683 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 683 to Senate Bill 106.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 683 to Senate Bill 106. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 155, introduced by Senator Orangel, an act relating to homeless persons, revising provisions relating to certain crimes committed by homeless persons and providing other matters properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 625 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 625 to SB 155.
Assemblywoman Torres has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 625 to Senate Bill 155. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 283, introduced by Senators Pazina et al., an act relating to healthcare, requiring certain persons and entities to furnish healthcare records electronically under certain circumstances, prohibiting such persons and entities from charging a fee that exceeds a certain amount to furnish healthcare records electronically if the healthcare records are maintained electronically, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 681 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 681 to Senate Bill 283.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 681 to Senate Bill 283. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 310, introduced by Senators Goycochea et al., an act relating to dentistry, providing for the licensure and regulation of expanded function dental assistants, creating a special endorsement for dental hygienists to practice restorative dental hygiene, providing for the regulation of the administration of local anesthesia and laser radiation by a dental hygienist or dental therapist, authorizing a dental hygienist who possesses certain qualifications to prescribe and dispense certain drugs, authorizing a public health dental hygienist to authorize an expanded function dental assistant or dental assistant to perform certain tasks under certain circumstances, providing penalties and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 50, end of Section 50, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 680 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 680 to Senate Bill 310.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 680 to Senate Bill 310. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 328, introduced by Senators Titus and Wynn. An act relating to cannabis, eliminating the exemption of the Cannabis Compliance Board from the provisions of the Nevada Administrative Procedure Act, revising procedures governing the disciplinary proceedings conducted by the board, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 698, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 698 to Senate Bill 328.
Assemblywoman Gorlow has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 698 to Senate Bill 328. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 330, introduced by Senator Lane, an act relating to health care, revising requirements for certain health insurance plans to provide certain benefits for preventative health care relating to breast cancer, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 9, end of Section 9, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 580, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 580 to Senate Bill 330.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 580 to Senate Bill 330. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 335, introduced by Senator Orenshaw, an act relating to property, authorizing tenants subject to certain eviction proceedings to assert certain affirmative defenses relating to rental assistance, and establishing procedures relating thereto, authorizing a justice court to establish a diversion program for certain tenants subject to an action for summary eviction, and providing other matters properly in thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 23, end of Section 23, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 660, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment number 660 to Senate Bill 335.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 660 to Senate Bill 335. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 370, introduced by Senators Canizaro et al., an act relating to data privacy, requiring certain entities to develop, maintain, and make available on the Internet a policy concerning the privacy of consumer health data, prohibiting such an entity from collecting or sharing consumer health data without the affirmative voluntary consent of a consumer in certain circumstances, requiring such an entity to perform certain actions upon the request of a consumer, requiring such an entity to establish a process to appeal the denial of such a request, requiring such an entity to take certain actions to protect the security of consumer health data, limiting the circumstances under which a processor is authorized to process consumer health data, requiring a processor to assist certain entities in complying with certain requirements, prohibiting a person from selling or offering to sell consumer health data under certain circumstances, prohibiting the implementation of a geofence under certain circumstances, prohibiting discrimination against a consumer for certain reasons, authorizing certain civil enforcement, requiring certain persons to develop, maintain, and make publicly available a policy concerning the storage and retention of biometric identifiers, establishing requirements governing storing, transmitting, protecting, collecting, and sharing biometric identifiers, prohibiting the sale of a biometric identifier, providing penalties, and providing other measures properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 35, end of Section 35, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 679, proposed by the Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 679 to Senate Bill 370.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment Number 679 to Senate Bill 370. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 418, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, enacted into judiciary, requiring a candidate to the office of district judge to submit an application attesting to his or her qualifications for office and providing of the rules properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 699, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 699 to Senate Bill 418.
Assemblywoman Gorlow has moved for the adoption of Amendment Number 699 to Senate Bill 418. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed in the general file.
Senate Bill 434, introduced by Senator Neal, enacting to retirement, revising provisions governing eligibility for membership in the Public Employees Retirement System, revising provisions governing the options for service retirement allowances under the system, revising provisions relating to the granting of a divorce, revising provision governing the disposition of certain pension or retirement benefits upon dissolution of marriage, and providing other rules properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 630, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 630 to SB 434.
Assemblywoman Torres has moved for the adoption of Amendment Number 630 to Senate Bill 434. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted and engrossed into general file. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 minute recess.
1 minute recess. The Assembly will come back to order. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 8.
Order of Business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all rules be suspended. Reading so far had considered first or second reading as appropriate, and Senate Bill 501, 503, and 504 be declared emergency measures under the Constitution and placed at the top of general file and third reading.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 503 be taken from its place on general file and be placed at the top of general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Order Business 8, motions, resolutions, and notices.
Notice of exemption, May 25, 2023. The Fiscal Analysis Division, pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6, has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bill 452, Wayne Thorley, Fiscal Analysis Division.
That will take us to Order Business 12, general file and third reading.
Senate Bill 503, introduced by the Committee on Finance, an act relating to education, ensuring sufficient funding for K-12 public education for the 2023-2025 biennium, apportioning the state education fund for the 2023-2025 biennium, authorizing certain expenditures, making appropriations relating to base per pupil funding, weighted funding, and other educational purposes, revising provisions relating to at-risk pupils, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 17, end of Section 17, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks. Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very lengthy explanation, so please bear with me. Senate Bill 503 provides funding for K-12 public education for the 2023-25 biennium. The total public support for school districts, charter schools, and university schools for profoundly gifted pupils is estimated to average $12,863 per pupil in fiscal year 2024 and $13,368 per pupil in fiscal year 2025. Section 3 appropriates $1.1 billion in fiscal year 2024 and $1.5 billion in fiscal year 2025 from the State General Fund to the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan account in the State Education Fund. Section 4 authorizes other revenue of $4.4 billion in fiscal year $4.4 billion in fiscal year 2024 and $4.3 billion in fiscal year 2025 to be received and expanded for state support of K-12 public education. These other revenues include, but are not limited to, local school support tax, public schools operating property tax, governmental services tax, an annual excise tax on slot machines, transfers from the permanent school fund, revenue from mineral leases on federal land, room tax revenue, recreational marijuana retail excise tax, and transfers from the Cannabis Compliance Board. Sections 5 and 6 require the Department of Education to transfer total funding of $194.8 million in both fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 to school districts for food services and transportation, and total funding of $483.8 million in fiscal year 2024 and $483.9 million in fiscal year 2025 for local funding for pupils with disabilities. The statewide base per pupil funding amount is $8,966 per pupil in fiscal year 2024 and $9,414 per pupil in fiscal year 2025. Enrollment is projected to slightly increase to 471,283 pupils in fiscal year 2024 and to 471,754 pupils in fiscal year 2025. Section 5 and 6 further provide additional weighted funding for each English language learner at risk and gifted and talented pupils estimated to be enrolled in a public school, which is expressed as a multiplier or weight to the statewide base per pupil funding amount. The multiplier for English language learner pupils is 0.45 for each year of the 2023-25 biennium, with total funding of $212.5 million in fiscal year 2024 and $223.2 million in fiscal year 2025. The multiplier for at-risk pupils is 0.35 for each year of the 2023 biennium, with total funding of $198.7 million in fiscal year 2024 and $208.6 million in fiscal year 2025. The multiplier for gifted and talented pupils is 0.12 for each year of the 2023 biennium, with total funding of $8 million in fiscal year 2024 and $8.4 million in fiscal year 2025. Section 7 provides general fund appropriations of $245.7 million in fiscal year 2024 and $252.8 million in fiscal year 2025 for the state support of pupils with disabilities. In addition, revenue of $2.2 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium are authorized for expenditures to provide additional support for extraordinary high-cost pupils with disabilities. Section 8 provides general fund appropriations totaling $44.3 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to the other state education program budgets for categorical grant programs, including, but not limited to, the Career and Technical Education, Jobs for Nevada Graduates, and the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching grant programs. Section 9 provides general fund appropriations totaling $7.7 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for the Professional Development Programs account. Section 10 distributes $7.6 million of this funding in each year of the biennium for the 3 regional professional development training programs. Section 11 distributes $100,000 of this funding in each year of the biennium for the statewide council for the coordinations of the regional training programs to provide additional training opportunities for educational administrators in Nevada. Section 12 provides general fund appropriations of $560,886 in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for the 1/5 retirement credit purchase program account. Section 13 provides general fund appropriations of $2.4 million of each year of the 2023-25 biennium and authorizes $3.8 million in fiscal year 2024 and $4 million in fiscal year 2025 to continue the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program. Section 14 appropriates $3.2 million in each year of the 2023-2025 biennium to the Interim Finance Committee that may be requested by the Department of Education to increase for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program. Section 15 authorizes $851.7 million in fiscal year 2024 and $878.9 million in fiscal year 2025 for the Education Stabilization Account, also otherwise known as the K-12 Rainy Day Account. Section 16 revises the definition of at-risk pupils in statute, consistent with the revised identification of such pupils approved by the money committees. And Section 17 indicates July 1st, 2023 as the effective date for this bill. Order Business 15.
Order Business 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I ask for your support of this historic funding in SB 503. It's a 26%, 29% by the end of the biennium increase. As many of you know, it is my honor to be a 4th generation educator. And when I was looking over some notes last night and trying to figure out some things, and I gave my mother a call as well, we started talking about what that would be, a 23% increase. Education has been underfunded in our state since since my father started kindergarten in 1947 at Robert Mitchell Elementary School in Sparks, Nevada. Let me make sure that's clear. 1947. We have not funded education. This body is finally starting to do something about it. And we have been doing something about it when we can. Today is a day that these 3 generations of teachers before me would be standing up proudly because we are doing something. We are taking the necessary and long overdue steps to recognize that the most important investment in our state, our schools, are being recognized and are being funded. We are elected by our neighbors, by our communities, to do this job today. We are hired by them because they recognize that the pillars of government has to do with 3 areas. One is to propose things. The other is to check it, to have a balance in it. And let me tell you, we have been having a balance. We started our discussions long before this session started. As a matter of fact, the first set of discussions happened not with us, but with the Nevada School Funding Commission, a body that looked at how we are funding education based upon legislation that passed last session. They came up with recommendations, and they clearly stated, we are not funding education, and we are doing something about it. As a committee, we met. The subcommittee of education, which I am not part of, they met weekly. They had meetings daily, and the leadership of this body met almost on a daily basis with people about how to fund education. And that resulted in us actually talking with school districts and getting what they needed. And then finally, we come forward with a bill that was voted out of a subcommittee and then 2 days later voted out of a joint committee. And that bill is in front of you today. So for people that say that we are rushing a long overdue discussion, that is incorrect, and there is more than enough evidence to show that we have in fact been working hard. I want to thank you for all the work that people put in. Our staff put in so much more work, but more importantly, and I'd like to end with this, the last document I brought down with me today, I call this my happy folder because these are papers, cards, notes that students have written me over the years. And that's what this budget is really about. It's not about these large books. It's about the people that we're helping. I ask for your support of AB 503. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Are there further remarks on Senate Bill 503? Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to Senate Bill 503. Order of Business 15, please.
Order of Business 15.
First, let me say I do appreciate the work that has been put in, the hearings that we've had, the time in Ways and Means to discuss the education bill, and I understand the importance of the education bill. I truly do, as we all are here today. However, with that said, at the beginning of this session, our governor put forth a historic budget increase for education, and he set out to ensure that this money went to programs and, more importantly, the people, educators and students who need it most. The governor's plan ensures the funds and the oversight for those funds that Nevada students and parents need. We oppose this bill because we oppose using one-time surplus to fund ongoing expenses. We will not promise funds now that we cannot sustain in the future. The governor's budget added $6 million a year for both years to the next biennium. The governor also set aside the historic $2 billion budget increase to cover those future costs. This is historic. This is what Nevada needs, and we are in full support. Furthermore, in the executive budget, $291 million are supposed to go to early childhood literacy programs and the teacher pipeline for the next biennium. However, this is one-shot money that is, at this point, we cannot guarantee the future. We do not know if we will have these same funds in the future, and this could lead to a physical cliff in 2025 that none of us want. We never want to cut education. We want to always maintain it for the sake of our students, parents, and teachers. In 2019 was the first time our students could read by 4th grade at the rate of the national average. Our goal, the goal here, I believe, is to maintain and grow that. And that's why we need to specifically spend these one-shot monies as the governor laid out on early childhood literacy and the teacher pipeline. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Further remarks on Senate Bill 503, Assemblywoman Howdeggy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 15.
Order of Business 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Senate Bill 503. During my time in the legislature, we have never made these types of historic investments. Nearly $12 billion is going into the education budget over the next biennium. That is truly remarkable. This education budget is a huge victory for all Nevadans and, frankly, long overdue. As legislators, we all campaigned to improve our schools, and we met with parents, teachers, and students to discuss how to best improve our schools. Well, I truly believe that I can go back to my district and let my community know that I worked hard to pass an education budget our state deserves. A budget that properly invests in our schools and allows them to provide additional resources which will allow our students to thrive. Our children, our teachers, our education support staff, and schools will immensely benefit from this historic budget, which is why I am urging all of my colleagues to support Senate Bill 503 to show our communities that we are committed to improving our schools and our education system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Do we have further remarks on Senate Bill 503? Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 15.
Order of Business 15.
I rise in support of Senate Bill 503. As a mother, a grandmother, I understand the importance our schools make in the lives of our children. And as a chairwoman of the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, I also understand the importance their teachers, support staff, and all the surroundings within our schools play in developing our children as they go through our education system. Nevada's families, students, teachers, and support staff deserve a budget that invests in them, provides for additional resources, and truly gives them an opportunity to succeed. This is why I'm supporting Senate Bill 503, because I truly believe this budget will have a positive impact for our education system for years to come. With SB 503, we will see historic investments and funding, which will give nearly 30% increase in per pupil funding by the end of the next biennium. And that is truly monumental. I gotta say, the governor's recommended budget is just that. It is a recommendation to the legislative body. And once we get it, we have a constitutional responsibility to provide a balanced budget that we expect this governor to sign. And know the extra funding, the revenue that went into it is not a one-time increase. It is a revenue increase in this state. And as legislative leaders, we looked at the numbers. We calculated the numbers. And we are doing what we're supposed to do to be fiscally responsible and make sure that what happened in 1947 doesn't continue to happen in 2023 in this state. So with that, make no mistake about it, these investments will have a transformational effect on our educational system. And that's why I urge this body to vote in favor, yes vote, on Senate Bill 503. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Are there further remarks? Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to SB 503. Order Business 15, please.
Order Business 15.
I stand before you as, all of you know, a mother of 8, grandmother of 20. children who have attended the public schools here in Washoe County. My oldest is 40, been involved with the schools since the mid-'80s. And education, of course, is a very important subject to me, and I know to all of us as well. The discussions that we have here, the discussions that we have in our education committee, show our concern. But I think the thing that where we part company at times, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. Now, some could argue it's money. And yes, that's a component, but it's also reform. And if we aren't willing to give the governor's bills or packages consideration, we've got to try something different. We only need to look at other states that have done this and find things that work. And so while I understand the importance of funding education properly, I want to make sure we're funding things that work. And we are in dire straits. I'm a broken record. You know, when you graduate a Nevada high school, public high school, proficiency scores in English language arts are at 41, 43%. That's below even the 50% mark. And it's even worse for math. It's 26%. And unfortunately, those numbers that I quote are pre-COVID. They're even worse post-COVID. So I think this is what we agree on. We care about kids. We know we need to fund education. And where we part company is what does that look like? And I stand here today and says, it looks like reform. And it's needed, and we need to have the discussion. And education of all issues should not be partisan. And so I encourage my members to vote no on this, but not to give up, and that we go back to the drawing board and we have discussions that involve a lot more than what we've just been dealing with. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Are there any further remarks under Senate Bill 503? Before we open the roll, I will order that the remarks given under Order Business 15 this afternoon for Senate Bill 503 be entered into the Daily Journal. And seeing no further remarks, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There are 28 ayes, 14 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, I declare it passed and ordered immediately transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 501, introduced by the Committee on Finance, an act relating to programs for public personnel, establishing for the 2023-2025 biennium the subsidies to be paid to the Public Employees Benefits Program for insurance for certain active and retired public officers and employees, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Senate Bill 501? Seeing no remarks, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. We're going to Plan B, a roll call vote. So remember where you are in the alphabet, please, and remember to say aye or nay, not here.
Okay, Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Backus. Assemblywoman Bilbra Axelrod. Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblyman Carter. Assemblywoman Cohen. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblyman DeLong. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblyman De Silva. Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblywoman Glant. Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Assemblywoman Gorlow. Assemblyman Gray. Assemblyman Gurr. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman Hardy. Assemblyman Hibbets. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Koenig. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Assemblywoman Marzola. Assemblyman MacArthur. Assemblywoman Brittany Miller. Assemblyman C.H. Miller. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Assemblywoman Mosca. Assemblywoman Newby. Assemblyman Wynn. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Ortlicker. Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Assemblywoman Taylor. Assemblywoman Thomas. Assemblywoman Torres. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Urick. Speaker Yeager.
Aye. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declare it passed and ordered immediately transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 504, introduced by the Committee on Finance, an act relating to state financial administration, authorizing expenditures by various officers, departments, boards, agencies, commissions, and institutions of the state government for the 2023-2025 biennium, authorizing the collection of certain amounts from the counties in the 2023-2025 biennium for the use of the services of the state public defender and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 29, end of Section 29, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Remarks. Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Order Business 15, Mr. Speaker.
Assemblywoman, do you have the remarks? I'm sorry.
No.
I will come back to you in a moment. Let me go
Thank you.
first to Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno for the remarks, and then we'll come back to you. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 504 provides funding and authorizes the expenditures of funding other than state general fund appropriations or state highway fund appropriations. The funding sources include federal funds, self-funded budgets, receiving money through fees and other means, and revenue sources such as licensing fees, gifts, grants, interagency transfers, and other funds, which total $31.71 billion over the 23-25 biennium. Additionally, due to the specific statutory language for some of these agencies, Senate Bill 504 includes authority for the Nevada Gaming Control Board and the Nevada Gaming Commission to expend $69.5 million from the general fund over the 23-25 biennium. Similarly, the bill includes authority for the Department of Transportation to expend $840.5 million from the Highway Fund over the 23-25 biennium. The money committees approved a total funding of $1.4 million over the 23-25 biennium for the personal and operating costs to add 8 new positions for support for the implementation of the statewide Council on Financial Independence and Individual Development Account Program, and for the office's Investment Division, Cash Management Division, College Saving Division, Unclaimed Property Division, and Nevada ABLE Savings Programs in the Treasurer's Office. The Cannabis Compliance Board, the money committees approved reserve reductions totaling $1.5 million over the 23-25 biennium for 8 new full-time positions for additional supervisory and information technology support. The money committees further approved reserve reductions of $358,704 over the 23-25 biennium to relocate the Cannabis Compliance Board Carson City office. In the closing budgets for Nevada System of Higher Education, the money committees approved revenue from all sources totaling $2.23 billion for the 23-25 biennium, Of the total revenues, non-general fund revenues total $761 million, or 34.1% of the total funding, and include student registration fees, non-resident tuition, student application fees, federal and county revenues, and a transfer from a non-state support budget. In closing the Governor's Office of Economic Development budgets, the Money Committees authorized non-general fund revenues of $77.2 million over the 23-25 biennium, which includes $62.9 million in federal, state, small business credit initiative funds. The Money Committees approved the Governor's recommendations to reorganize the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs and authorized room tax revenues of $30.1 million in FY24 and $32.7 million in FY25 in the new Tourism Cultural Affairs Administration budget. The Department of Health and Human Services Director's Office, for the Fund of the Resilient Nevada, the Money Committees approved opioid settlement fund reserve reductions of $12.2 million over the 23-25 biennium to support allocations to various public and private entities to address the impact of opioids and other substance use disorders in the state, and in accordance with the needs assessment and statewide plan developed to address these issues. In closing the Aging and Disability Services Division budgets, the Money Committees authorized cost allocation revenues of $1 million over the 23-25 biennium to support information technology needs for 4 positions to provide human resource support and 1 administrative services officer to support central fiscal services as recommended by the Governor. In closing the budgets for the Division Healthcare Financing and Policy, the Money Committees approved a new private hospital provider tax budget, including authorized private hospital provider tax revenue of $572.3 million transfers to the Medicaid budget, totaling $405.4 million to fund the non-federal share of supplemental and direct payments, totaling $1.06 billion, and transfers to Medicaid administrative budget to fund administrative activities, including 5 positions and associated expenditures, totaling $886,272 over the 23-25 biennium. In closing the budgets for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, the Money Committees approved $30 million in TechCom fees over the 23-25 biennium to support the crisis response programs, including the 988 Crisis Call Center and Crisis Stabilization Centers, as well as 1 existing position and 10 new positions, full-time positions, and associated expenditures. The Money Committees also approved 5 new full-time faculty surveyor positions and associated expenditures, totaling $813,913 for child care and developmental block grant funds over the 23-25 biennium. Finally, the Money Committees approved the Governor's recommendations to transfer the child care licensing program to the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services to consolidate related child care facility programs under one division and provide for efficiency. For the Child Assistance and Development budget, the Money Committees approved a combination of Child Care and Development Fund, discretionary, and mandatory match block grant revenues totaling $3.3 million over the 23-25 biennium for 14 new positions, including 7 positions to support child care service centers and 7 positions to provide improved strategic planning and oversight. The Money Committees also approved additional temporary assistance for needy families block grant funding totaling $20 million over the 23-25 biennium to increase child care subsidies for the new Employees of Nevada program. The Department of Transportation, the Money Committees approved 50 new positions for the department to administer essential programs and comply with federal and state laws. The Money Committees also approved the Governor's recommendation for the sale of highway revenue bonds and associated interest earnings of $151.5 million in FY25 for construction projects. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Are there further remarks on Senate Bill 504? Assemblywoman Garlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order Business 15.
Order of Business 15.
Today I am rising in support of Senate Bill 504. COVID-19 may no longer be at its peak, but its impacts are still rippling through many communities. Senate Bill 504, or the Authorizations Act, provides desperately needed funds for relief programs in the governor's office that help everyday Nevadans recover and get back on their feet again. This includes affordable housing programs, which so many Nevadans need, as rent and the cost of homes continue to rise. These investments will provide relief to many Nevadans in need and continue to make our state the place to live, work, and raise a family. Please join me in supporting Senate Bill 504.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Further remarks on Senate Bill 504? Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Senate Bill 504. Order of Business 15.
Order of Business 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an exciting time for us to be here at this monumental measures we consider are in front of us today. And I am honored to represent not only my Assembly district, but the 74,400 residents that go to work each and every day and depend on us to do our jobs. Today, I rise in support of Senate Bill 504, the Authorizations Act, because it provides a record level of critical funding for Nevada Medicaid, and it works to fund benefits programs for our public safety officers and our public employees. All Nevadans deserve access to quality and affordable health care. This has always been true, but it's especially more important now as many Nevadans continue to deal with the lingering effects and complications from COVID-19. This measure helps to ensure the money that has been previously allocated for those COVID-19 relief efforts get where it's going quickly to help our citizens be successful. I hope that you'll join me in supporting Senate Bill 504, so as many Nevadans as possible will have health care access, as well as the departments, the divisions, and the programs we support help our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Further remarks on Senate Bill 504? Assemblywoman Backus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Senate Bill 504. Order of Business 15.
Order of Business 15.
Small businesses are the backbone of Nevada's economy. They are owned and operated by everyday Nevadans who work hard and with an entrepreneurial spirit. But it isn't always easy. Sometimes small businesses and their owners need assistance. Senate Bill 504 provides significant investment into small businesses, helping to buoy businesses that may be struggling to make ends meet, or help to kickstart small businesses that haven't formed yet. Please join me in supporting Senate Bill 504 and help small businesses thrive in Nevada.
Any further remarks on Senate Bill 504? Seeing none, I will ask the Chief Clerk to try to open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, I declare it passed and ordered immediately transmitted to the Senate. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 8.
Order of Business 8.
Thank you. I move that Senate Bills 192, 235, 280, and Assembly Bills 448 and 62 be taken from their place on general file and be placed at the top of general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 436 and Senate Bill 293 be taken from the Chief Clerk's desk and be placed on general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 436 be taken from its place on general file and be placed at the top of general file for the purposes of amendment.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
1 minute recess, Mr. Speaker.
1 minute recess. The Assembly will come back to order. We are under Order Business 8. Assemblywoman Howdige has moved that Senate Bill 436 be moved to the top of general file for the purpose of amendment. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are going to go back briefly to Order Business 4, reports of standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Natural Resources, to which was referred Senate Bill 159, has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass. Leslie Cohen, Chair.
Order Business 11, second reading and amendment.
Senate Bill 159, introduced by Senator Hammond, enacting the pest control, requiring the Director of the State Department of Agriculture to adopt regulations to authorize a person to train as an applicator to engage in pest control activities under certain circumstances, providing penalty and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 17, end of Section 17, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file. We'll go next to Order Business 12, general file and third reading.
Senate Bill 436, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, enacting to insurance, requiring the Commissioner of Insurance to submit to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Commerce and Labor a report concerning the service contract provider industry in the state and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 710, proposed by Assemblywoman Marzola.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 710 to Senate Bill 436.
Assemblywoman Marzola has moved for the adoption of Amendment number 710 to Senate Bill 436. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered reprinted, engrossed into general file.
Senate Bill 192, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, enacting to hospitals, authorizing the Board of Trustees of a county hospital district to hold closed meetings under certain circumstances, revising provisions governing meetings of a Board of Hospital Trustees of a county hospital, revising certain provisions related to a hospital advisory board, authorizing a Board of Hospital Trustees or hospital governing board to employ dentists, revises certain exemptions governing unprofessional conduct by a dentist employed by a Board of Hospital Trustees or hospital governing board, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority declared passed in order to transmit it to the Senate.
Senate Bill 235, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, enacting criminal procedure, revising provisions relating to pretrial release hearings, authorizing a court to impose additional conditions of release on a person under certain circumstances, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Senate Bill 235? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority declared passed in order to transmit it to the Senate.
Senate Bill 280, introduced by Senator Wynn, enacting health care, requiring a hospital to provide for the insertion or injection of certain long-acting reversible contraception if requested by a patient giving birth at a hospital, limiting the amount a hospital or provider of health care may require an insurer to pay for long-acting reversible contraception under certain circumstances, prohibiting an insurer from refusing to cover a contraceptive injection or the insertion of certain contraceptive devices at a hospital immediately after an insured gives birth, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people stated that Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 18, end of Section 18, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Senate Bill 280? Seeing none, Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There were 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declared passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 448, introduced by Assemblyman Yeager and Howdy, enacting taxation revising the exemption from the real property transfer tax applicable to certain transfers of real property between business entities and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Assembly Bill 448? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There were 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declared passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 62, introduced by the Committee on Revenue, enacting taxation rising the qualifications for obtaining the exemption from taxation for certain property used for housing and related facilities for persons with low incomes, revising the qualifications for obtaining the exemption from taxation for certain property used for housing and related facilities for elderly persons or persons with disabilities, making legislative findings and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Assembly Bill 62? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There were 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declared passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate. We will now go to Order Business 13, unfinished business of the preceding day. There being no objection, the Speaker and Chief Clerk will sign Assembly Bills 13, 20, 53, 56, 76, 98, 100, 101, 110, 116, 118, 122, 126, 131, 144, 146, 154, 162, 164, 185, 189, 210, 214, 225, 227, 235, 251, 264, 282, 289, 298, 311, 316, 318, 333, 343, 359, 361, 366, 394, 407, 414, 424, 455, 456, 464, as well as Senate Bills 4, 5, 8, 13, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 25, 29, 32, 39, 43, 59, 85, 87, 91, 105, 115, 117, 119, 129, 131, 133, 138, 147, 148, 153, 164, 169, 177, 181, 182, 194, 210, 214, 223, 243, 247, 257, 258, 259, 260, 261, 264, 286, 298, 299, 316, 338, 340, 351, 354, 381, 382, 397, 401, 410, 411, 437, and 442. Assemblywoman Howdy.
1 minute recess, please.
We'll be in a 1-minute recess. The Assembly will come back to order. Still under order business 13, unfinished business of the preceding day. There being no objection, the Speaker and Chief Clerk will sign Senate Bills 501, 503, and 504. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 8, please.
Order of Business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bills 109, 146, 269, 302, 314, and 391 be moved to the top of be taken from their place on general file and be placed at the top of general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll go to order business 7, messages from the Senate.
Senate Chamber, Carson City, May 25, 2023. To the Honorable the Assembly. I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 22, Amendment 706, Assembly Bill 34, Amendment 620, Assembly Bill 52, Amendment 686, Assembly Bill 54, Amendment 584, Assembly Bill 70, Amendment 619, Assembly Bill 121, Amendment 664, Assembly Bill 172, Amendment 689, Assembly Bill 193, Amendment 673, Assembly Bill 213, Amendment 690, Assembly Bill 231, Amendment 666, Assembly Bill 262, Amendment 692, Assembly Bill 272, Amendment 566, Assembly Bill 305, Amendment 693, Assembly Bill 364, Amendment 656, Assembly Bill 371, Amendment 607, Assembly Bill 373, Amendment 606, Assembly Bill 391, Amendment 694, Assembly Bill 408, Amendment 655, 722, Assembly Bill 437, Amendment 553, Assembly Bill 439, Amendment 643, and respectfully request your honorable body to concur in said amendments. Sherry Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of the Senate.
That will take us to order of business 12, general file and third reading.
Senate Bill 109, introduced by Senator Nguyen, enacting anatomical gifts authorizing a coroner or medical examiner to release a body or part of a body that is the subject of an anatomical gift under certain circumstances, prescribing the procedure for the court to appoint a person to make an anatomical gift or part or all of a decedent's body under certain circumstances and providing other measures properly thereto. The people state of that are represented in Senate and Assembly. Do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 8, end of Section 8, end of that.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Senate Bill 109? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 36 ayes, 6 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declare it passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 146, introduced by Senators Lang et al., enacting healthcare, revising provisions governing the regulation of hospitals, prohibiting a health carrier from denying certain providers of healthcare from entering into a contract to join a network of the health carrier under certain circumstances, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Senate Bill 146? Seeing none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declare it passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 269, introduced by Senator Orenshaw, enacting cruelty to animals, revising certain prohibitions on restraining a dog, revising certain exemptions that authorize a dog to be restrained in a certain manner or maintained in certain enclosures, providing penalties, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Senate Bill 269? Seeing none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 27 ayes, 15 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declare it passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 302, introduced by Senators Orenshaw et al., enacting healthcare, prohibiting healthcare licensing boards from taking certain action against a provider of healthcare or certain other persons for providing or assisting in the provision of gender-affirming healthcare services, prohibiting the governor from surrendering or issuing an arrest warrant for a person who is charged in another state with a criminal violation relating to gender-affirming healthcare services, prohibiting state agencies, local governments, and members of the judiciary from assisting in certain investigations and proceedings initiated in other states related to gender-affirming healthcare services, requiring certain healthcare licensing boards to examine the feasibility of reciprocal licensure for healthcare providers who provide gender-affirming healthcare services in other states, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks? Seeing none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 28 ayes, 14 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declare it passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 314, introduced by Senator Lang, Assemblyman Carter, enacting to energy, revising the definition relating to certain renewable energy facilities, revising provisions governing the establishment by the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada of biennial targets for the procurement of energy storage systems by certain electric utilities, requiring the Commission to reevaluate the existing biennial targets, limiting an obsolete provision relating to the establishment of such targets, establishing requirements for the installation of electrochemical energy storage systems, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks? Seeing none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 31 ayes, 11 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declared passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Senate Bill 391, introduced by Senator Harris, Assemblyman Watson Backus, an act relating to governmental entities, revising provisions prohibiting certain counties, cities, and unincorporated towns from sounding sirens, bells, or alarms for certain purposes, establishing civil penalties for violations of such prohibitions, authorizing the Attorney General to bring a civil action to recover such penalties, and providing other matters appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks? Seeing none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 41 ayes, 1 nay. The bill having received a constitutional majority declared passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate.
Assembly Bill 112, introduced by the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, an act related to wildlife, defining the term wildlife for the purpose of wildlife crossings, creating the wildlife crossings account in the State General Fund, requiring the Director of the Department of Transportation to administer the account, requiring the Department of Transportation, in consultation with the Department of Wildlife, to develop and publish an inventory and list of certain projects relating to wildlife crossings, requiring the Director of the Department of Transportation to review the standards and specifications for the design and construction of highways in the state, to determine the standards and specifications necessary for incorporated wildlife crossings and related highway features into the highways of the state, requiring the Department of Transportation and the Department of Wildlife to consult with certain persons regarding locations for wildlife crossings and related highway features, authorizing the Director of the Department of Transportation to adopt regulations making an appropriation to implement projects relating to wildlife crossings and providing other matters appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks on Assembly Bill 112? Seeing none, the chief clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The chief clerk will record the vote. There are 42 ayes, 0 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority declared passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate bills on general file be taken from their place on general file and be placed on the general file of the next legislative day.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. That takes us back to order of business 15, remarks from the floor. Would anyone like to give remarks from the floor? Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Seeing no other business before us, I move that the Assembly stand adjourned until May 26th at the hour of 11:30 a.m.
Assemblywoman Howdigi has moved that the Assembly stand adjourned until Friday, May 26, 2023 at the hour of 11:30 a.m. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Ways and Means Committee, we are adjourned. Count your blessings.